Hello and welcome to the i3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography here at the School of Visual Arts. I am Julie Graham. Tonight we are joined by documentary portrait photographer Robert Kalman. Robert has been making large format photographs on streets around the world for more than 40 years. He has also worked as a freelance editorial photographer for newspapers and magazines in the US, and in amongst, he was a school principal. Robert's portraits have been exhibited broadly across the states in New York, Colorado, California, and more, with several exhibitions held at our fabulous local Soho Photo Gallery. Robert's work has been seen in Black and White magazine, The New Republic, Shots magazine, Politico, F-Stop, and The Hand magazine, which I had to look up, but it looks pretty cool if you're interested in alternative and historic photographic processes and printmaking. Robert has published more than a dozen books and is currently touring with his latest, a collection of portraits entitled, What's It Like for You to Be an American? Settle in and enjoy these entrancing people. Let's have a large format welcome for Robert Kalman.
You're the best. Thank you, Julie. Thank you very much. Julie kept saying, packed house. Is it me? No, she said, it's usual. So it was my understanding that one of the guidelines was I'm to give you some background about my career in photography. And I must admit to you that I had a dilemma. And I'm going to let you help me through this little glitch that I faced. I didn't know when I was assembling the presentation whether I should start with this photograph and start you with the charming little girl, or this photograph of the boy in the Little League costume, uniform. So, by show of hands, how many would like to have me start with the little girl? And the little boy? Right. I'd like to make you believe that, I started making photographs when I was in the crib, but that's not quite true. This child, however, basically started when she was very, very young. This is my daughter, Jordana. She is a fine art photographer in her own right. She's brilliant, and she gave me permission to tell you all of this. Usually she's very private about that. So there's my daughter as a young photographer. This is my work as a young photographer at 9 years old. My parents had given me a brownie that I walked around the neighborhood making photographs, and this is my best childhood friend, Mark Finkelman. And Mark and I played Little League, and you notice the brilliant environmental setting that I placed him in. How I carefully, he's not quite in the center, so there's that Cartier-Bresson feel to it. The windows and all of that, the hose on the side, yes, it's brilliant. Let me show you some other brilliant early photographs that I created. This is my sister, Hillary. And I want to point out to you that I realized very early on that you don't put someone in direct sunlight, so I found the shade, and there she is in this Hawaiian costume. She comes back later in this presentation in a more poignant way. This is my 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Olson. She told me once, you'll never amount to anything. This is my mom. Oh yes, fashionista, right? There was some intake of breath there by some of the older people in the room. Yes, that's a very 1950s hat and outfit and couch, and that's a picture of my mom. This gentleman is married to that woman. This is my dad at Williamsburg, Virginia. And this was what his life must have been like, married to. She would have appreciated me saying that. Here's another photograph of my mom at the beach. Notice once again the clever use of light and not having sharp shadows or highlights. And here's how I began my documentary career, photographing my parents at work, washing her hair in the kitchen sink. Later, when I was an adult, making serious photographs. This is after her heart surgery. So quickly, the arc of my career: I had a brownie gifted to me at the age of 9. I shifted to 35 millimeter 12 years later, 1970. I worked at the New York Times. Let me say that again. I worked at the New York Times, but not in any photographic way. I was the news assistant to the managing editor. First, I started as a copy boy. I'll explain later what that is. Copy boys don't exist anymore. I was a school teacher from 1970 to 76 in a small New Hampshire town. I became the school principal there, and I was a school principal for 40 years. So it made me a brilliant educator as well as a great photographer, because it really informed what I do. While I was in New Hampshire, I did a lot of newspaper work for about, how many years is that? 8. I worked there for 8 years doing newspaper work all across the state. And then when I moved back to New York, I started freelancing for various magazines and newspapers. I started working with large format, which is going to be the substance of this talk starting in 1987. Soho Photo Gallery, just around the corner. Used to be on White Street. Now it's on 23rd. Yes. I was there for 5 years. Great, great experience. Really helped me grow as a photographer. And for 30 years, I have worked at portfolio building, making lots of projects that interest me, and I published books. Okay. So where did my photo education come from? Well, I wish I could have been an SVA student. Where did you say they were? In the middle? Raise your hand if you're an SVA student. You know, you're really lucky, because I didn't have a formal education in photography. I had to kind of learn it on the fly, and there were a lot of things that are absent in my education. But in the 1970s, Life magazine, Leslie Smolin has some interest and some understanding of Life magazine, announced this library of photography. And I said, oh, I want to read that. I see some nods down here. Some people remember. They had this incredible volume, encyclopedic volumes about photography. And every other month, for $7.95 plus shipping and handling, you got a book. And when they arrived, I read them from cover to cover. They were extraordinary. If you can find copies, they're not out of date. They're not dated. There's plenty of good stuff still in there. I do want to mention some of the teachers and influencers, to use a millennial phrase, and people who inspired me. First, Arnold Newman, and he's first because I studied with Arnold, and he taught me quite a bit about environmental portraiture. I know you thought the Mark Finkelman photo at the beginning was a great environmental portrait, but I learned a little from Arnold while he was my teacher. The great Paul Strand, 20th century giant in photography, one of my heroes, as well as August Sander, the great German photographer. And I think if you know anything about these photographers' works, you'll see some of their influence in my pictures. Vanessa Winship, what a great, great, understated photographer. Just an amazing photographer, as is Judith Joy Ross. I love Judith Joy Ross's photographs. I love the kinds of photographs that she made. By the way, all of these photographers are large format photographers, either 8x10 or 4x5. Andrea Modica, the great Richard Avedon. You know, this background with the white seamless, I went through a period of time where my assistant and I would put up white seamless on St. Mark's Street and photograph using the north wall. And then I thought, Richard Avedon's done this already. Why am I doing it? A photographer you may not have ever heard of, but another British photographer. She's absolutely spectacular. Alice Tomlinson is a hero of mine. And the great Mike Disfarmer, the nutty studio photographer from the 30s and 40s from Arkansas. Okay, so let me show you some early New Hampshire newspaper work. And notice I learned what the decisive moment was all about. Here's by the way, all of these were on 35 millimeter film with flash or sometimes not flash. But I don't know how I made some of these in the era of automatic focusing and so forth. A coach gesticulating. This is the former heavyweight champion of the world, Jack Sharkey. I'm looking to the old Geezers Road to see if they're going, oh yeah, there's Jack. Yes, at a relay race, he fired the gun. A third baseman for a girls' softball team. High school sports, if you really need an education in how to shoot effectively and quickly in a documentary way, cover high school sports, and it's fabulous. And the young man on the far side, David Fahey, I have dozens and dozens of photographs of this boy with his face just like that. He was absolutely amazing. I didn't have to wait for the decisive moment. It was always there. And then I moved to the Hudson Valley, and they started to assign me covers for their magazine. This is Duchess Magazine, as you can see. This is Darrell Hall. I'm not going to give you the backstory of this photograph, but let's say that Darrell Hall was a star and I was not. So it was a very interesting experience, making photographs in the field. The reason I'm showing you these is the magazine finally figured out that if you use large format color transparency material, the color is much better on the cover. And so we switched from 35 millimeter to 4x5, and I was the only game in town. The Zagats. People still know Nina and Tim Zagat? Remember them? Yeah, remember them? They stole some of my photos. They never paid me. I just mentioned that. But here's my favorite cover that I've made. I'm going to talk about this specifically. As you can see, this is Frank Stella, an absolute giant in the art world in the 20th century. So he lived in Dutchess County. He lived in Amenia, which is in northeast Dutchess County. So I go up with a writer, and it's a cover story, so I had to make a cover shot. And, you know, initially we're putzing around and making rapport, and the writer's, asking him questions, and I'm making the shots on the fly. And he finally says to us, "Would you like to see what I'm working on now?" What are you going to say, no to Frank Stella? So, yeah, sure, Frank. All right, let's go. So we get in cars and we drive all the way down to Beacon, New York, which is also in Dutchess County, Surrey. Beacon, New York, where Dia Beacon is there. Some of you may know that museum. But there's also a huge, huge warehouse where sculptures are created. So I only thought that Frank was a painter, but I didn't realize he was a sculptor. Anyway, we all drive into the parking lot, and in the middle of the parking lot, there's this huge pile of construction material, cinder blocks and rods and cement, and it's just a plopped mess. So we get out of the car, and I'm schlepping the cameras, and he looks up, he stops us. He goes, "This is great, isn't it?" And he keeps walking. And I looked at the writer and I said, "This is a piece of shit." And she said, "Well, I'm glad you didn't say that in front of Frank. This is his piece." Oh. She looked at me, she said, "Kalman, your problem is you don't understand difficult art." And I still don't. Frank Stella. Okay. I want to highlight the magazine work because one of the privileges I had was for every issue They let me do anything I wanted. They said, you got to produce a photo essay for every issue. So it was carte blanche. So, I mean, I look back at a story like this. It's more informative to me that these kinds of essays that photographic essays that I did really kind of informed my growth as a photographer. But this is Katy Garcia Renat. She was 21 years old when I did this essay about her. She was a Bard student, a Bard senior. She was creating dance, she was choreographing, but she knew she would never be a prima ballerina at ABT. And interesting, Katy is now the head of the Department of Dance at Bard College, so it's nice to... But that was a 35 millimeter job. And then they said, we're doing an issue on volunteerism. Go out and make some pictures of people doing volunteer work. So I thought, all right. It wasn't like now where women were doing equal work to men. It was an oddity at the time in the early 90s when women were doing certain jobs that only men had performed. And this is a small upstate town, Rhinebeck. So I took the 4x5 and I went through Dutchess County, and specifically first through Rhinebeck because that's where I lived. And I started photographing women who were volunteer firefighters. And in the end, I wrote the little essay. That also helped me. It sharpened my ability to write well about stories. And what I wrote was, you know, when your house is burning down, you won't care whether the person holding the hose trying to save your house is a man or a woman. So this is like a paean to the female members of volunteer firefighting corps. And I was also very fortunate to be accepted as a member of Soho Photo Gallery in 2015. And I'm showing you these for a reason, because it is the oldest collective gallery, photo gallery, run by photographers for photographers. It's a community of photographers. And it gave me great opportunity to show a lot of work and to get good at understanding how galleries work and what they need and what you need to do as a photographer to be successful doing that. For the young photographers in the room, when you get shows like this, here's a tip. Make installation photos. Don't put yourself in them. I didn't realize it at the time that I should just make pictures of the installation, not pose, you know, do the headshot thing. Okay. Yeah, so I like to call myself relentlessly old school. I don't really know what that means. It just sounds really good. It sounds like it fits for me. But here's a small gallery of me as the relentlessly old school photographer at work. This is early on in Mexico. Look how young and handsome I was then. This is me schlepping the camera in Nicaragua. This is on the road with my assistant and wife, and I will introduce her momentarily, Linda, in West Virginia for the Americans story, Americans project. This is also in West Virginia. This is York, Maine, and Portland, Oregon. And I find it absolutely essential to have a highly skilled, competent, reliable assistant accompany me. And this is a photograph of Linda, my assistant, and also my wife. Oh, by the way, wherever we are, when we have the big camera set up like this, photographers, they like swarm over to us, you know, whoa, is that a Hasselblad? No, it isn't. So they always want to take our photo. And we said, sure. And they're usually not very good. But this is one of the few photographs taken in Wichita, Kansas by a real photographer who I think we look pretty good. Here's another photograph of just Linda guarding the camera. And if you notice, if you look carefully in her arm, she's holding the portfolio. And the reason she holds the portfolio is our method is this. I am like a casting director in the street. I'm looking. Suddenly I see somebody. I say, Linda, the woman with the white cap. And Linda goes over and she's holding the portfolio and she introduces herself and she starts talking about photography and my photography. And she holds the portfolio in front of them and they go, oh, you can make me look like that? Yeah, all right. So that's how we roll. This is Linda freezing her butt off in North Carolina, but she was still able to manage to do the things she needed to do, even though her fingers went numb. Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit. That's all of my stuff. Let's shift gears a little bit and show you an important photographer from the 20th century who has something important to tell you.
The portrait of a person is one of the most difficult things to do because in order to do it, it means you must almost bring the presence of that person photographed to other people in such a way that they don't have to know that person personally in any way, but they still are confronted with a human being that they won't forget, that the image of whom they will never forget. That's a portrait.
So, if Paul Strand is right, and portraits are one of the most difficult things to do, I'd like to go into more depth by showing you some of the portraits that were made in a formal way using a large format camera, either a 4x5 or an 8x10 in the street. So the first group of photos that I'm going to show you, a variety of different projects attached to them. And I'm going to invite you to, as you watch them, imagine that you're just flipping through them you're looking through them in a magazine. There'll be no commentary. So would like to go through each of these projects, each of these series in a little more depth with some commentary, beginning here in Nicaragua. I've had two long-term projects in Nicaragua. The first I started in 1990. I had been part of a sister city project, and at the first visit I made, I had 35mm equipment with me, and I had never been to Nicaragua. And it was at the height of the Sandinistas being in control, and this was, I was with an American delegation to monitor the election between Daniel Ortega and Violeta Chamorro, and I absolutely fell in love with the Nicaraguan people. They were so warm, so effusive to us as Americans when we were mining their, their harbors and supporting the Contras against them at any rate. That was my first trip. And after that initial trip to the village, where I only used 35mm equipment, I returned with a 4x5 to make formal portraits like this one. So this is what I looked like over 35 years ago. I didn't hear anybody gasp. This the little village of Nicaragua. So yeah, the children were always around, always begging to have their photos made. And of course I would make them, but not with the 4x5. As we zoom out, you can see all the way on the left the young man whose portrait I was making. So I'm frequently asked by other photographers why I choose to shoot. What? Exactly. It's upside down, which is what I see when I'm under the dark cloth looking at the ground glass. Now, I just want to point out to you that while this may look confusing at first, it's much easier to make a great portrait of in my opinion, to make a great portrait of someone when you're setting up and this is what you see, because what you see are relationships in geometry. You see the shapes and the spatial relationships. Everything is laterally, in addition to being upside down, it's also laterally reversed. So left is right and right is left. But this is the young man I saw, and the flora here and the beautiful wood and all of that helped me make this very nice portrait of a very handsome young man. Here's some more, using the environment as part of the photograph. I have a 40 by 50 inch photograph, a copy of this over my fireplace. This is Martin Mejia. I found him sitting there just like that. He's 102 years old. And I asked him, at one point, I said, what's the secret? And he said, I was an orphan at 7, and I've only believed in God since then, and he has blessed me and taken me through life. 102. Good advice from a Nicaraguan. Because the process is so much slower and it's much less spontaneous than when you're using a small handheld camera to make a portrait, I'm in a position to learn much more about the person I'm photographing because I have to interact with them. That really is the first, it's not about the gear. It's not about large format versus small format. It's not the gear that makes the photograph. It's you, the photographer. Your mind, your heart, and your skill as a human being when you're making portraits. I was making a photograph. I had my back to this woman. I didn't see her. And I made a photograph of somebody, and Linda taps me on the shoulder and says, "Turn around." And I saw, and that's exactly how she was positioned and standing. She's great. Look at the strength in that woman's face. I rarely set up anybody. Where I find you is how I photograph you, although sometimes I will move you into spaces that make a better composition. But this is Jose Lopez, the ice cream seller in town. This is exactly as I found him, except I had to move the ice cream cart slightly diagonally to make it look better. And when I made the photograph, I didn't notice that he was nervous. His fist is all balled up, his right hand is balled up. Clear sign of nervousness. So after 4 trips in the early 1990s, I returned to this village 20 years later, having been inspired by a photographer in Buffalo named Milton Rogovin, who used to photograph the working class sections of town and did several projects on folks he photographed 20 years before and then 30 years before. So I went back to Nicaragua wanting to do the same thing, photographing these folks 20 years later. Unfortunately, not everyone was still alive. I did pose him in the doorway, Jose Lopez. I posted him in the doorway, and his brother had died of a heart attack. But from this journey, I made this book, Diptychs. That's Juan Garcia with his great-grandson in his lap. Juan is in his 70s there. The little boy is 4. And there they are 20 years later, a big, strapping, handsome young man and a 90-year-old great-granddad. So when I do these projects, it's very important to me to include conversations and the words that we exchange. And I like to do it in a way that presents the person in another way. So this is a woman named Yaritza. When I took the first photo, she was 12 years old. And in the second photo, she's 31. And I asked her, so what's life been like for you over the 20 years? And I had her write it down. And this is what she had to say. The computer I use to make this, the words are always larger. Excuse me. Yes, Yaritza Maria Martinez. As a child, my parents gave me away to my grandmother, who was very abusive and who beat me constantly. I can read it better here. To get out of the situation, I got married at 15. I'm still with my husband today, and we have 2 children. From my childhood experiences, I learned the importance of being patient. I'm very protective of my children, and I'm working hard to give them a better future. I didn't say, obviously, this is her writing it in Spanish, and there's the translation. But now that you know that her grandmother beat her, and she was married at 15, how do you look at this photograph now and have a different understanding of this human being who lives in Nicaragua? This is Mercedes. When I first met her, she had this big goiter. I thought she's never going to live, because healthcare in Nicaragua is fourth world. Well, she survived. And why? Faith in God. So that's her front door. This is Fidelina. Unfortunately, she did not have the same success as Mercedes, although she's still alive. I just love the first portrait of this hard-working, campesina, this farmer, and she lost her leg to diabetes. And this is the last, but my favorite photo of this entire project in Nicaragua. So this is Faustino. When I photographed Faustino, when we returned to the village, we brought all of the photographs from the first round. And we showed Faustino his photo. I presented it to him. He looked at it and he went, that's not me. So the 2 women, the village women I was with, they went nuts. They went, what are you talking about? Of course that's you. Look, it's your nose. Look at your nose. That's not me. He was insistent. He would not be persuaded. But he still let me take his photo. And there he is. You be the judge. Is that Faustino or not? Later, the ladies told me that he was probably just embarrassed that in the first photo he looked so poor. And So let me pause for just a second at this juncture and say a few words about what motivates me to make portraits. I don't make really any other kind of photographs. You heard Strand say that the most difficult thing to do is to make a portrait. And the same sentiment was voiced by this photographer, Henri Cartier-Bresson. Copyright Arnold Newman, one of my heroes. This is what Bresson said. Unless you think that portraits are easier now with digital and all of that. Well, I attended a workshop. I showed my portfolio to Raymond Meeks, a fairly well-regarded, well-known Hudson Valley photographer, and this is what he said to me. So why do I do it? Why do I make portraits? Well, I would say that I have no idea what I said to Raymond when he asked me the question like 10 years ago. But if he asked me again, I would say this. First of all, as a school principal and as a photographer, This is one of the most important principles that carries me through my day. When I meet people, I understand through John Dewey, the great American educator, that the deepest urge, excuse me, in human nature is the desire to be important. Everybody in this room has that desire, whether you can acknowledge it easily or not. In fact, we were making photographs in the Lower East Side, and I approached a woman, and I asked her permission first, because I don't make pictures of people when they're unaware of me. And so I asked her, and she said yes, and we made her photo. This was the Rolly, not with the big camera. And afterwards, she thanked me so. She said, "I'm so glad, thank you so much. People take my picture all the time without asking." I said, "Well, I understand that, and it's my belief that it's my role in life to make people feel important." And she looked at me and she said, "I don't feel important, and I don't want to." It seemed like it was very important to her not to feel important about feeling important. This African traditional call and response, so to speak, when people greet one another, has always affected me very deeply. It's the notion of not just visibly seeing somebody, but when you encounter someone saying, "I see you," meaning, "I am with you in your presence," and the response back is, "I am here to be seen." It's an extraordinarily respectful response to, it's like shalom aleichem, aleichem shalom, or salam aleikum, aleikum shalom. It's peace be unto you be peace. I am here to be seen, and that's my job as a portrait photographer. Last one, August Sander, my boy August. Once said, "Every person's story is written plainly on the face, though not everyone can read it." And I like to be arrogant enough to think that I'm the person that can read it, and I'm the person that can convey it to a viewer that neither me nor the portrait subject knows somewhere in the future. Okay, back to New York. Spent lots of time walking the streets of Manhattan, especially. Manhattan is a very special place to find people to photograph. And this is a photograph that I took in the mid-2000s. And I love this woman's attitude, the hand on the hip. And the environmental parts are also important to me. The swirlies on here and the swirlies over here. And, I think it's a fairly decent portrait. Well, the writer, George Slade, who wrote a profile of my work and me for Black and White magazine, wrote that. How do you think I felt when I read that, huh? Thank you. So, if you whip out your phone, you can read the whole article, and that's one of my photos too, of a man in Nicaragua with his baby. Poignant, no? Yes, and if you photograph the QR code, you can read the whole article. And then if you let me know that all the students are there, oh. Nobody in the front row here is doing it. Okay, so bear with me while I show you why New York is such a rich place to make photographs of people. Okay, here are some of, here are some of my there we go. Okay, who am I imitating here? Richard Avedon, white seamless, but look at those subjects, huh? The person, the gentleman on the left is one of the first trans people that I had the pleasure of photographing. And it was at a time when I was asking them, so what's something you'd like people to know about you that nobody knows? So they would write it down, and then they would hand it to me, and we would finish our transaction. And that was the project. So he left, and I looked down, and he wrote, "This man's a lady." And I looked at Linda, I said, did we get a model release? Oh my God. So Linda ran down St. Mark's to catch up with Danielle Bernal and get her permission. And if you walk the streets in the Lower East Side or any place down Lower Manhattan, this is Ben. He's everywhere. He's still everywhere. Here's a sampling of New Yorkers. Oh, no white seamless. Yes, I've learned to effectively, what I say, blow out the background using the 8x10 because it's so effective at that, and giving nice, creamy, soft backgrounds that allow the person to pop out of the photograph and make them more memorable for you. I did a piece on, I hung out at the dog park at Tompkins Square, and being in the Bohemian area, you get a lot of Bohemian-looking folks with their Bohemian-looking dogs. And so, being at the dog run was hard to make photographs there. So I did encourage people, and we walked someplace else. And you'll notice all of these, I didn't realize this until I put these down here. All of these folks I posed on stairs with their dogs. And if you think it's easy photographing a dog with a 4x5, try it sometime. These are photographs of Americans that we made in and around New York. Show you the wide diversity that you can find in our fair city. And then there was a time when Hand Magazine was knocking on my door. I was enamored with 19th century wet collodion processing. And so we schlepped the dark box and the chemistry and all of that stuff through the streets and the parks. You will notice that because people who are photographed in this way have to be very still because the exposures are at least 2 to 4 seconds. They always have to brace themselves. The photographers in the 19th century, the studio portraitists would use a brace behind somebody's head to steady them. But I tried that. It's very inconvenient. So you'll notice the woman on the left is her back's against the wall. The gentleman in the middle, Julie Graham, recognized him immediately. Anybody else know who this is? This is Johnny Rosa, a celebrity photographer from the 80s. And the woman on the right is, bracing herself against the fence. Okay, so sometime in 2007, we were making portraits in New York, and I saw this couple walking ahead of us. And the woman was older, very slim, very, very elegant, in a long skirt with a dark gray braid down her back. It was just stunning, stunning woman. And the man with her was this elegant African-American man in a sharp dress blazer, great shoes. They were great. And for some reason, I lost all my nerve. I didn't send Linda over to talk to them. I just froze. So this is the picture that I didn't take. But right after that, I saw mixed race couples everywhere. It's like when you're looking for blue Hondas and you're standing on the corner of a street, that's all you see. And suddenly I started looking for interracial couples. And I found them everywhere. So I made a book of portraits of mixed race couples. I called it No Difference Between Them. For several years later, I was making photographs in the street. I had the dark cloth over my head, and I hear somebody behind me saying, "Excuse me." And I get out of the cloth, and I look at the person. I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're Robert Kalman." I thought, "Oh, do I owe you money?" He said, "No, I'm Isaac." Isaac. I went, "Isaac." He said, "Yeah, you made my portrait with, for your book. We were almost on the cover." I went, Oh, yes, Isaac. Yes, Jew Miller, right? He said, yeah. Oh, man, how are you guys doing? About 2 weeks later, we broke up. For the ages, though. It's still here. So, black and white, mixed race couples everywhere. Florida, Manhattan, Florida, Provincetown. When we visited Barcelona, we were still in the midst of the project. So when we got to Barcelona and I met my fixer, I said to her, we want to go to the bohemian side of town and, we want to be able to make photographs of mixed race couples. She said, what is that? So I explained it to her. She said, oh, we don't do that here in Barcelona. In Spain, we don't mix races. This is one of 12 couples that we photographed while we were in Barcelona. She was Italian and he was Spanish. And we've extensively traveled throughout Europe. And when we do, we generally spend the equivalent of 2 weeks being tourists sometimes and sometimes doing our work. I think because I don't have a specific project when I go to Europe, when Linda and I go to Europe, I don't have a strong set of photographs to show, but I think I have good standalone portraits because that's what I do. And when we don't have a guide with us, this was a man we photographed in Hungary, we have our shtick written out, translated so that we can communicate what we need. As you can see, please stand here, I'm a photographer, all this. It works. He waved me away. He said he didn't want to read it. He just said, take my picture. These were the years when Polaroid still existed for large format cameras, so I could provide the person a photo on the spot. These are just a bunch of memorable European folks. And I was telling a dinner companion about, I saw a person tonight in a restaurant, and I said, oh man, I'd like to photograph that guy. And so my dinner companion said, well, how do you do that? And I said, well, wait until the presentation and we'll tell you. Because we saw this young woman in a restaurant in Istanbul, and we were with someone who was translating for us. And I saw her. She was just like, whoa. Was it blue? That was blue, right? I think her outfit was blue, not red. I didn't have the heart to tell her that, convicts in the United States dress like this. But she looked great, and she was very, very gracious. So I said, I want to photograph her. So we walked over to the table. We're having lunch in a restaurant, and my translator came with us, and she spoke perfect English. So I explained. She was gracious. She said, after lunch, I'd be delighted. Okay, great. Done. So we go back to the table and we start having appetizers brought. And I look over at Husnu, and Husnu suddenly stopped eating and he's white as a sheet. I said, are you okay? He says, my God, it's Mirkan. I said, who's that? He said, she's an international pop star. I didn't recognize her. Oh my God. So he rushes over to the table. I can read the body language. He's like clutching his chest. Oh, I'm so sorry. She's, no, it's okay. It's like if I walked into a restaurant and said, I'd like to photograph that woman. Who is it? Oh, it's Beyonce. Oh, okay. All right, so we made this photograph of her. But this particular phenomenon of bumping into local celebrities is like this phenomenon. So this is Mira Falusi. She was a CNN correspondent in Hungary. This man is an international pianist named Adam Falegi, also in Hungary. We actually stayed in the apartment house where he lives, and every day he would play, and we'd have this wonderful concert, the music to listen to. Excuse me. This is Gabby Toth. Gabby Toth, again from Budapest, won the equivalent of America's Got Talent, and you can find her on YouTube. You can find Mercan, the first woman I showed you. She's on YouTube too. Those videos are very steamy, very hot. This is Tilla Torok. She is a musician in Hungary. And this is Hesna Algawi. Hesna Algawi is a combat correspondent known all over the world, except here in the United States. At any rate, we met her on the street. I loved her look. I posed her. I asked her some stuff. And she was in a bad way that day, because she said, I'm getting married next week, and I just came from the hairdressers, and I hate my hair. Go ahead, take this picture. And so I did. So we've traveled extensively also in Latin America. The San Blas Islands are an archipelago off the coast of Panama. And yeah, well, when you go to a place like this, it was absolutely amazing to live in their culture on their islands. And I was told, well, you'll have to pay them to photograph them. And I said, yeah, we'll see. And this was still the time of Polaroid, so I would give them a Polaroid and they would be thrilled. We never paid anybody for photographs. Good face, yeah? Right. So the way the indigenous people on this island make money, their living, is the women make these applique blouses called molas, or they're what do you call them? Like a swatch on their here. There's one on the front and one on the back. And when they're done, they take them off and they sell them to tourists. You can buy them. And so when the Panama Canal, the tourist ships going through the canal, waiting their turn, they put people on these little boats and they take them to the island. And the women sell their molas to the tourists. And of course, the tourists take pictures and pay $1 for every photograph they make. At any rate, we had this experience. So we do this island hopping. We go from island to island. All of them had a different chief. All of them had like a slightly different culture from the other island. Some were big islands, some were little islands. Anyway, when they found out that we were giving away photographs, we would come to an island and the women would be holding up their babies like this. You know, take the picture. So that's why we have this little girl. She's cute. Young boy. I have a 40 by 50 inch photograph of this woman over my bookshelf at home. The director, he's Mexican, yeah? Guillermo del Toro, he's Mexican, right? In his 60-minute, or his Sunday morning interview, he said, there's nothing greater than the landscape of the face. And this is who I thought of when he said that. Okay, here's one of my faves. No matter where we are in the world, I always like to photograph cops. It's an ongoing project. So we were in Santiago, Chile. We're making photographs in the street, and I noticed these two cops are watching us. So I said to Linda, they're coming over. So they wander over. The shorter officer said, you know, okay. I explained. So he said, well, take our picture. Okay. So I took his picture. I love the contrast in their heights and the way they chose to pose themselves. For cops, now this is like, you're never going to be able to unsee this. Cops all position themselves a certain way when you ask them if I can make your photo. Here's some examples. This is in Poughkeepsie last month. The only exception to this macho, let me hold the belt or the equipment thing, These are 6 Roman police officers. You know, when we travel, we show other cops, we say, yeah, we want to take your photo. Look, here. So we were in Portugal, and I talked to one officer who spoke English. And I said, well, look, and he's flipping through the book, and he stops, he looks, he points, I went, Rome. He says something quickly in Portuguese, and the guys behind him just went nuts. I can imagine, because the Portuguese cops, 6 of them, all lined up like this, all in a row, all the same. The reason I love this photograph, every man posed himself, every man is self-contained. Each one of them makes a great individual portrait. And the only man doing the fig leaf pose, the cop fig leaf pose, is the guy on the far right. This was like, I couldn't resist this. He was a rookie. He was only a week on the job. And there's that pose. Come on, now you look for it. Notice the boots, right? The lacing on the boots, see that? Okay, this is a military police officer in Portugal. And now I'm going to show you his partner. And they said to me, we don't want to be photographed together, we want individuals. What's the moral of the story? Be a demure, photogenic police woman in Portugal. I love her sweet disposition. And this is the last cop picture I'm going to show you. So we walked up to the officer in camo, and I explained what we wanted. And he looked at the book, and then he turned to another group of cops who were standing next by. This was in Budapest at the Opera House. He said something in Hungarian, and they all burst out laughing. I looked at him, I said, what? He said, we're not cops, we're actors. We're in a Bruce Willis movie. You just missed him. So I made the photo anyway. Makes for a good story. The man on the right is the man on the left's son. The man on the right was a stuntman in the movie. And you know, so I forget the name of which movie this action thriller. So I was so excited when it came out, and I watched, and they never showed footage of these guys. All right. You remember this, the second or third, yeah, it was the third picture of my sister in the garage with the shading. You know, she's wearing a little Hawaiian thing, she's a little girl. Okay. So this is my sister Hillary. Hillary has passed. She was 52. She had a bad heart. She was a sweet soul. And Hillary came out of the closet in 1976 and announced to the family that she was gay. She was a lesbian. And so, okay, in 1976, it was different. It was a different era. And so we all, we love you, and okay, we'll understand. My mother didn't quite understand. And a few weeks later, I said to her, so what's life like for you right now? And she showed me this note our mother had written her. Can you all read that in the back? Okay. Yeah. And my mother worked for Goodman's, the matzah people. So that was her notepad. Okay, so I decided that I wanted to do a project to honor the memory of my sister when it was just on the verge of gay marriage being voted in by the Supreme Court. So we used this same approach in doing the lesbian portraits. I stopped lesbians in the street and I asked them, what's life like for you right now? And the answers were much more upbeat, much more engaged in optimism. I'm learning you don't need a reason to help others. Or this from Chelsea. Or this lovely sentiment from Louise. And what I learned in doing this, this project, which generated a book and generated 2 fairly successful exhibitions is the lesbian, the L in the LGBTQ part of the community, gay and lesbian community, felt or would express to us that they didn't feel like they were getting their just due. So, because they felt like all the publicity was going to the male end of that community. Yeah, it's changed. So now I'm going to start to wind this down. I want to share with you my latest project. Very excited about this. I'm very proud. What's it like for you to be an American? And give you a little insight into how it started and where it is at the moment. So right after the January 6th insurrection, I was absolutely devastated. I couldn't imagine this was happening to the country that I love. Imperfect as my country is, I was devastated. And just a few weeks before, I had been riding with Linda. We were going through a section of the Hudson Valley, and there were lots of American flags in this neighborhood that we were driving through. And I said to Linda, excuse me, I said to Linda, must be a lot of Americans who live here. Ha, ha, ha. And then I said, I wonder what it's like for them to be an American. And then January 6th happened. And I said, now I have a project. Because I wanted to understand and learn what Americans were thinking and feeling in terms of their national self-identity. Nothing to do with politics. It's about everything to do with what it's like for you to be an American. And so we met and photographed using an 8x10. We traveled over 20,000 miles over 4 years, hitting every region in the country, not every state, but every region. We wound up going 22 states plus DC. And if you notice, all of the folks in this photograph, my goal was to make a book that looked democratic. And as diverse as the folks in these photos are, everyone is scaled the same. Everyone's facing the camera in the same way, because we are all Americans and therefore we are all equals. And that was thematically how I decided to do this. I get a lot of questions about, well, where did you find the Americans? Well, initially I would call somebody like Stephanie Berger. I say, you know anybody in DC? She'd call Carol Guzzi. All right, so I'd call Carol Guzzi. Oh yeah, do this, do this, do this, go here. Because I'd ask, where can I find, lots of people in shaded areas where there's a bathroom nearby, because we're going to stand around for 8 hours. And I'd get good recommendations. And I'd call other local photographers. But it wasn't working, especially when I went to areas that I knew nothing about. And it finally dawned on me, what's the one thing everybody has to do 3 times a day? You got to eat. And so we finally figured out that we should camp out in front of restaurants and grocery stores. And so to find the kind of restaurants that I thought would be the most fruitful, because I was looking to photograph typical Americans. So I wasn't looking for photographs on the Upper East Side. We'd go to some place and I'd Google Greasy Spoon restaurants. This one was in Omaha, Nebraska. And there pop up all those that are classified as Greasy Spoons. I see someone really smiling in the back there, so he knows. Mom and pop kinds of diners, not corporate, not, what's the thing in the South? Waffle House, yeah. Not Waffle House, because they throw us off the property. Well, what are you doing? Well, we're making photographs. No, here you're not. Okay. So we don't do McDonald's or any of those restaurants, mom and pops. And our usual strategy is to show up early in the morning. I have, what I do is I look on Google to see what compass direction the facade of the building faces. And although this facade faced west, Notice the beautiful wall of ivy, which faced north. And north side of the building is the best side to make good portraits, or at least the way I make them. And there's a proud American with his hat, right? So that's how we find people. So many times, answers to the question, what's it like for you to be an American, would be very surprising. Here are two very attractive African-American young women from the same generation. The woman on the left is Christina Laswell. We met her in Beaufort, South Carolina. And Kennedy Johnson. I expected the geezer row to say, you know, is from Atlanta. And, you know, if you thought, well, they'd probably have similar views, you'd be wrong. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Christina started her thing, I am so proud to live in a country where I can be whoever I want to be. And Kennedy said, I'm not proud to be an American. There's a history here that makes my soul and spirit sad. So one of the things that was important to me was to capture not only their words, but also their handwriting. If you know the writer Anna Quindlen, can you raise your hand? Does that ring a bell? Okay, come on. What is this? Anna Quindlen. All right, yes, okay. People of a certain age. Anna Quindlen wrote this, handwriting tells a story. Agasander said, people's faces tell a story. So, portraits, faces, writing, story. Handwriting tells a story, and there's a simple truth. Something written by hand brings a singular human presence. Something written by hand is a piece of your personality on paper. So, in addition to presenting people and how they looked, we also started photographing them as they were doing their writing. These are, yes, they're snaps, iPhone snaps, taken usually by Linda. They are in color. We knocked down the color to make them look more dramatic in black and white. But you know, there's Anna Quindlen's thought about handwriting, exposing your personality. And there's my boy Auguste talking about face. Let me show you some faces from around the country. This is Cecilia England. I'm not going to read what she wrote to you, although you may be trying to do that right now, but I want to tell you, she's one of my most memorable subjects. This is in Hermiston, Oregon. Hermiston, Oregon is a very, very conservative red part of Oregon. In fact, it wants to secede and become part of Idaho. So I saw Cecilia from a distance, and I said to Linda, that woman. She's wearing a bright red Nebraska t-shirt, bright red. So Linda, I can tell by the body language from the distance that she's going to come over to the camera. So she comes over, and oh, hi, I'm Robert, you know, good to meet you. Would you stand over here, please? I want to make your photo. She said, just a minute. First, I have a question for you. I said, yes, ma'am. You're not a Democrat, are you? Well, ma'am, what I am is an American, just like you. All right, let's do this. You know, I showed you the two African-American young women. Here are two men, one heavily tattooed on the face, Tompkins Square Park, and a man with a t-shirt that says "Amosexual," holding a rifle, and he has a crucifix, which is obscured by the writing. This is Dominic and Donald. Not going to read the whole thing, but the first sentence Dominic wrote, I love being American. First sentence Donald wrote, I love being American. Wow, can you imagine that? Two people with obviously different points of view, different cultural awareness of their country, love this country. Something to think about. The place that we met the most independently spirited people was in West Virginia. This is Brandon Sign. We had been photographed, it was in Wheeling, West Virginia. There were a lot of homeless folks where we were near the bus station. And so I photographed him. Primarily what drew me was the shirt. And I said to him, hey, I never pay for photos, but he was such a cooperative guy and nice guy. I said, let me give you a couple of dollars. He said, no, man, it's okay. I said, no. He said, read what I wrote. Oh, I can be who I want to be. Okay, thanks. Just a few more. This is a police officer who, like many folks who feel like they have two identities, I've met Korean Americans, Mexican Americans, Hispanic, Arab, Trinidadian Americans. All those folks feel like they're in two different worlds. Like one Korean American said to me, when I go to Seoul, I go visit my family. I'm not Korean enough for my family. And here in Manhattan, I'm not American enough for my American friends. And that was expressed over and over and over by folks who have like a hyphenated sense of their national identity. Time. Done, right? Okay, we're almost done. I love, this is the last photo in my book. Can you just grab one of the books for a second out of the bag? I want to use it as a prop. This is the last photo of the book. This is Beth Davison. We met her in Beaufort, South Carolina. Beaufort, South Carolina is right next door to Parris Island. Who goes to Parris Island? Marines. That's where they train, one of their basic training places. So we were in this park. We were in this park, and I saw her from a distance. She was at a picnic table with a lot of other folks. And I saw her, and she's holding the baby. And I said, oh, man, she is absolutely stunning. We have to get her photo. So I sent Linda over to break the ice. And Linda turns around. You're not mic'd, so I'll be. Usually I let Linda say what she said. But Linda chatted her up, and then she turns to me as I'm walking over, schlepping the 8x10 over this picnic area. Linda says, she's not American. Oh. So I looked at her, and I introduced myself. I said, wow, you are so lovely. I'm so, what may I ask what your nationality is? She said, I'm Trinidadian. And then she looked down and she said, but my baby's an American. I'm married to the Marines sitting right over there. I thought, if there are photo gods, man, they are shining down on me right now. So there's the result. And she wrote, and I think maybe you've had enough time to kind of sneak a peek at what she wrote, but it's very, very optimistic, very hopeful. I still get emotional. E pluribus unum, from many one. There we are, all Americans. What I learned is our national identity as Americans is defined by our differences, not our similarities. That's what I learned after 20,000 miles. That's our national character. And thanks to former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Anybody know where this is? Oh, come on. It's in the 2nd Avenue subway. To remind all who enter, from many one. We are one people. And so I do want to make you aware that the photos are on the wall in Stamford, Connecticut right now. Currently on view until May 25th. When we made the photos of the installation, I'm not in them. I'm in a show with these photographs, the Center for Photography at Woodstock, which is like a branding because it's really in Kingston, New York.
We need some time for questions.
Time for questions, okay. A couple more shows later in the year. Going to skip this for a second. If you want to buy the book, there it is. We brought a few. If anybody wants to purchase a copy tonight, there's the QR code. And let's close where we started. Who is that? Paul Strand. He observed, "A portrait confronts you with a person you will never forget." And I'm hoping that tonight, in this presentation, you've seen somebody and you've been introduced to somebody's portrait and you will never forget them. Don't forget us. I don't remember the name of the photographer who took that. I should have credited her.
You should.
Okay, Q&A time.
Okay, we have a few minutes. Hands up. Yeah.
Could you unpack, you've mentioned a bit in one of the series that you were showing how some of the people whose photographs you were taking, you were worried that they were going to want payment for their photos, but instead you just gave them a Polaroid, and that was a good, easy, clear for you, that you didn't have to worry about paying them. And then later you talked about the man in Virginia who you wanted to pay, but he didn't want to pay. So how could you unpack like the squaring of those two sort of
different feelings that I had at the time?
Yeah.
Sure. The kind of work we do, I feel like I'm a very adept photographer of people, and I make really good portraits, I think. And so if I make your portrait, I'm not going to pay you to make your portrait. In fact, if you need a headshot, you call a photographer. You call, no, Stephanie doesn't do them, but you call somebody, to make your picture, and you pay them. So when I take your photo, I do it because I want to engage in feeling important myself, but helping you feel important, because I've stopped, there are thousands of people here, but I stopped you because I want to make your portrait, because your presence really affected me in some way. But I'm not going to pay you. But in return for your time, I'm going to give you a copy of your portrait. And that's a fair exchange. Hold on a second. With a homeless man, I spent a considerable amount of time with him. And I felt like, I absorbed his time. I helped him feel important. I sent him a picture, ultimately. But I just felt like, I had photographed several other homeless people that morning. And one of them talked to me about, hey, you should go to the soup kitchen. They give you free soup there. It's really good. And I thought, well, the folks in this area, in this neighborhood, I don't want to exploit them in any way. So that's why I offered him some money.
Thank you.
But I heard somebody wanted to object.
We need you for the mic if you're going to speak for the recording, please. Thank you.
No, and I was just saying that you weren't keeping the photos, so so you were giving them back. You were giving them the photo. You weren't keeping it for your own self. So.
In this day and age of no Polaroids, or Polaroids I can't use, I send everybody a print and an electronic copy of their photo, and they sign a model release.
Okay, we have time for one more. Anyone? Come back to you. Two more, Frank, and then you.
Yeah.
I'll be back.
Thank you.
Hi, Frank.
Yeah, hi.
It's
Hi there.
better
Thank you for your great presentation tonight. I just want, sorry for the technical question, but I'm just curious to know, like from Nicaragua to traveling around the U.S., do you process your film as you're going along, or do you wait until you return? Also, how do you deal with the complexity of analog nowadays with shooting 8x10 and trying to get the materials? And unfortunately, there's no more 8x10 Polaroid, but, that's my question.
So the answer to the first question is we don't process on the road. We wait until we get home. The second answer to the question is if you go to B&H, you can easily obtain all the film you need, all the chemistry, everything still exists. And the day it doesn't, I know how to do wetplate collodion.
All right, last one.
so much.
You're welcome.
You need the mic for our recording, and you need to project for the room.
Gotcha. All right. So first, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You know, I want to kind of go back to that Second Avenue subway that you brought up, where Chuck Close was, right? And, you know, those paintings were so close to photography that for a lot of people, it's hard to tell the difference. You know, today, we're seeing a lot of AI images created, and it's challenging for photographers and for people to know what is true and what is not. Do you have a hope for yourself for what photography should be into the future, given this current state of tech that we're in? And thank you again.
I like to remember the quote from Saul Leiter, who said once, "I don't have a philosophy, I have a camera." And so I know I look incredibly young, but I'm an old guy, and I don't have time to learn all there is to learn about AI and even digital photography. I mean, when someone holds a digital camera, and when I hold a digital camera, all the choices that you have to make it's mind-boggling to me as an analog photographer who only has 3 choices to make: where to place the camera, where to have the person stand, and at what moment to let the cable release go. So I mean, this, from an educator, this may not sound so smart, but I can't worry about AI, and I'm just here now, and I make portraits. And I want to help you feel important when I make your portrait.
All right, we're squeezing in one extra.
Oh,
So, is it on?
It's just for the recording.
Okay, got it. So, you might have just answered my question already, but I'm going to ask you regardless. So, you shoot large format film, and I know that's might just be how you do it. But do you think that there's something to shooting analog that doesn't feel the same way in digital? Have you thought about that? Have you spoken to anyone about that?
you know, when photography was invented, only operators of cameras could make the photos. And then at the end of the 19th century, George Eastman invented film, and a camera that could contain the film and had a slogan: "You press the button, we'll do the rest." And so everybody could make photographs. In fact, everybody in this room, yes, you're all important, but you're all photographers, right? You all own a camera. When I make when I make a formal portrait of somebody, it's hearkening back to a day when the photographer had all the control. Now everybody has control. And this is much more democratic. But I still think that the kind of photographs I'm making are very different, especially when I pair people's words to their portrait. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This is robust.